fiscal house in order after decades of abuse. America is celebrating a historic trade agreement with the European Union earlier today, followed months of protesting from European leaders who were ultimately forced to back down after Trump threatened to impose a 30% tariff on their goods sold in America. Instead, the EU settled for a 15% tariff while lowering barriers to American goods. They also agreed to spend $750 billion on U.S. energy products and $600 billion on U.S. military equipment. President Trump saying he's happy they are able to come to a deal.
It's great that we made a deal today instead of playing games and maybe not making a deal at all. I think it's, I'm going to let you say it, but I think it's the biggest deal ever made. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
All right, folks, let's discuss with our trade panel. Nestpoint Managing Director and Republican political strategist John Thomas, and author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War, Gordon Chang. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. John, great news for the United States. Fairness returns, and the EU will no longer get to give us the shaft. They really aren't happy about that, by the way. But look who else isn't happy. Take a look at this quote from NBC Fake News. Quote, Trump reaches agreement with EU to impose 15% tariff with exceptions for key industries. The 15% tariff would be lower than previously threatened, but it would remain a high duty on America's largest trading partner. NBC Fake News, an alleged American company, is worried that the EU will no longer be able to treat us unfairly. They're actually rooting against the United States. So your thoughts on the deal and your reaction to the left wing's reaction to all this?
Well, this is a great day for Americans, and it's just another victory for President Trump here. I mean, we are seeing one trade deal after the next. This deal that he struck with the EU, Chris, is unbelievably and disproportionately fair for the U.S. I mean, this is exactly what President Trump did, and he's using actually what they call in negotiations, or Trump calls the art of the deal, he's using an anchoring technique. He explains to these countries saying, if you don't get in line, it's going to be up here, or we can meet somewhere in the middle. This is a win for Americans. Car companies in America, Chris, are going to start selling cars into the EU because they were boxed out before because of tariffs. It's a win. And then, look, the veil is off the American media. We knew that they weren't pro-America. It's clear they're showing their care about anybody but American. But also, it shows it's a case of Trump derangement syndrome, Chris. I mean, look, Trump could deliver world peace, and the media would freak out about it. So it's almost laughable.
Well, he is. He is doing that. Well, more on that later on the program. Gordon, as Trump was cementing his deal with the EU, top U.S. and Chinese officials resumed talks in Stockholm aimed to extend their trade truce by 3 months. In the meantime, the U.S. has paused restrictions on some tech exports to China as a sign of goodwill. China faces an August 12th deadline to reach an agreement. Beijing has relied on the U.S. politicians, selling out our country, selling out our people, and China is not going to tolerate fair trade. On the other hand, China can't walk away from the enormous American market. What's your read on where the filthy communists, what are they going to do?
I think they're panicking right now, and they're panicking because of the Sunday announcement of the EU trade deal. The EU is really important to them. They were trying to woo Brussels away from Washington, and they've utterly failed. They failed for a lot of reasons, Chris, but the point right now is the pressure is much greater on China than it was 2 days ago. And I think we're going to see, and it's not just the EU deal, but the one in the UK in May, which was really important because it had certain anti-China provisions in it, but also the deals with Japan and Vietnam. So President Trump is stitching up a lot of these trade deals. He is basically taking trade away from China. He's isolating the Chinese and tying the world to the U.S. I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Amen to that. Yeah, he's also taking out some of the energy incentives of China's ally, Mother Russia. They're not going to be selling their wares in Europe.
Yes.
Hey, John, in his press conference earlier today, President Trump also reflected on his tour of the Federal Reserve. Listen.
I was on much more opulent walls, ceilings, floors. We had to do this, and we did a very great job. I mean, you see how beautiful it is inside. Everything was saved. Everything was preserved. But I don't know what they did. They'd take down a ceiling and put up a new ceiling, and the new ceiling had no opulence to it. Or that fix the ceiling. But I would say that all I need is a good plaster and a can of paint. And, you know, they spent $3.9 billion. And I spent a lot of money, too, but it's I'd say 3.8 billion less, you know?
Yeah. The government is running a never-ending money pit, as you know, John, racking up $37 trillion in debt and counting. And amid all this overspending, the Fed, an organization that tilts anti-American, in my opinion, soaks U.S. taxpayers for another $3.1 billion for a lavish and opulent renovation for their office space in D.C., while at the same time, the same Fed keeps America's youth from being able to buy homes, keeps interest rates artificially high, costing the economy billions, maybe even trillions. Jerome Powell, in my mind, has become the poster child for eliminating the Fed's influence over our economy. What do you think?
Yeah, you're totally right, Chris. And look, if there is one thing that is indisputable about President Trump, the man knows real estate construction. If you're Jerome Powell, do not try to argue with President Trump about cost overruns. OK, this is something he gets. And it's really it was really great to see President Trump lean in there. And it's not just about the $3 billion worth of soaking taxpayer dollars. It's really about Jerome Powell's failure to protect the Americans by lowering interest rates. President Trump gets it. Lower interest rates reduce mortgage costs, credit card bills, cost of goods. This is something the Fed needs to do. But the Fed doesn't care about helping Americans. You notice the only time the Fed lowers rates, by the way, is when they're trying to help a Democrat get reelected.
Yes, absolutely. Which, by the way, Jerome Powell did to help Kamala Harris. Finally, Gordon, President Trump breaking more news in his trade meetings. He announced that he is moving his deadline to impose punishing sanctions on Russia from 50 days to just 2 weeks, after which he will impose 100% tariffs on any country that buys Russian exports, including oil. Trump said there's no need to wait since he knows what the answer is going to be. Now that the EU is buying energy from the United States, not Mother Russia, how do we see this playing out, especially when it comes to the U.S. deal with China?
Yeah, the important thing here, Chris, is that you have Russia no longer being able to sell gas to Europe because Europe will be buying American LNG. That puts additional pressure on Putin. And especially if President Trump goes ahead and puts those secondary sanctions and tariffs on India, China, Turkey for buying sanctioned Russian oil, we could see the end of the war fairly quickly because it's very simple. No money for Putin means no more war in Ukraine. And that would be a great thing for the world.
John Thomas, Gordon Chang. Gentlemen, appreciate the economic discussion today to lead the show. Straight ahead on the